Hello guys, I hope you're all doing well. If you can hear me, just let me know in the chat down below, please. I apologize for the background noise. That's my neighbors. But let me know if it's bothering you guys a lot. I'll try to do something about it, but there's not much I can do. Okay guys, if you can hear me, just let me know in the chat so I know that I can start right now and you're all here. Okay, perfect. You can hear me in the chat. So I'm gonna start. So we're gonna be talking about chapter 8, transport and plants. So we already spoke about, just a quick revision, we spoke about plants in general, okay? So we talked about that they are living organisms, they have a shoot system, and they also have a root system. And we also worked on classifying the plants. So remember we said we have non-vascular plants versus vascular plants. And remember, the vascular plants were the ones that contained xylem and phloem. So now let's talk more about xylem and phloem. So what's special about xylem is that they transport water and mineral salts. Okay? And now we will be looking at in more detail in chapter 8 how this happens. Okay? And the forces that allow it to happen. But just in general, remember, for water to be transported, what was the process that water moves? It was osmosis. And remember, in osmosis, water moved how? From high water potential to a low water potential. Okay, so this is important to note. So if they ask you what has a higher water potential, the soil or the roots, for example, of course the soil has a higher water potential. That's why water will enter from the soil to the roots and eventually reach the xylem. And don't worry about it, we will look at the process of that. Okay, and for mineral salts, remember we said it's by active transport. So since it's by active transport, we already spoke about active transport. What do we know about active transport? It needs ATP, so needs energy, and it goes against a concentration gradient. Okay? And for us, since we said it needs ATP, so it needs a source. So what is the source for this ATP? It's going to be by performing cellular respiration. Okay? Till now, does everything make sense? I'll just add also one more point about the xylem is that they are dead and hollow cells. Okay, so they lack nuclei, they lack a cytoplasm. Okay, they are dead cells. However, since they are dead, they must be supported by something. So they are supported how? They have a thick cell wall which contains lignin. Okay? Now to move on to what we talked about xylem. The other part of the vascular system or the vascular bundle is what? Phloem. Now for phloem, what does phloem transport? It transports sucrose, okay, carbohydrates. What do we call the process? We call this process translocation. Now in translocation, what do we have? We have a source and a sink. Now the source is where we make the carbohydrates, so we're performing photosynthesis. In the sink is where like the end destination for this sucrose to go. So always know this, that sucrose goes from the source to the sink and not the other way around. No, when we're talking about minerals, the roots take up the minerals, and it's the xylem who transports mineral salts and water. Phloem transports organic materials. Yes, exactly, organic materials. That's what the phloem transports. Okay, now since we said that the xylem are dead cells, what do you think about the phloem? Are they dead or living? So phloem, if you guessed living, you are correct. So phloem cells are living cells, exactly, they are living cells. And we say they are made up of what? Of sieve tube elements. Now, but there's an important thing to pay attention to. These sieve tube elements, what do they lack? They lack a nuclei, and they also lack ribosomes. So what does that mean? Since they lack nuclei and they lack ribosomes, they cannot perform vital processes. So they need the help of another cell. What do we call this other cell that's going to provide support and provide the necessary materials for the sieve tube elements? We're going to call it companion cell. And this companion cell has a nucleus, has ribosomes, and it's able to perform vital processes which will help support the sieve tube elements. Okay, so as you can see, I wrote for you, companion cell supports the sieve tube elements. Okay, is that clear? Just as a big picture about the transport. And now we'll look at it also even more when we look at the book. But before we move on, just the big picture of it. Is it understood now? Okay. Perfect. Okay, what do I mean by source and sink? So, in translocation is the transport of organic materials, and that is done by the phloem. So, let me give you an example. Let's say I am a baker and you are a customer. You are coming to buy, or I am selling bread since I am a baker. Where is this bread being made? I'm making this bread, so I am the source. Now you are buying it to use it, you are the sink. Does this example make it a bit more clear? Let me know if I made it clear so I can move on. If not, now we will see in the... Okay, perfect. Perfect. Now let's move to the book, okay? Just so we make sure we don't miss anything. So here in section point 1, they're just telling us what I already explained, the importance of the transport systems. Of course, if I put a plant in a hot and dry... Okay, wait, before I continue, we have a question. And they do not individually do the translocation. It's the phloem where the sucrose is being transported, like through the phloem. But how does that go? Like, let me show you. Okay, this is an important point also. So in the xylem, okay, let's go back to our drawing here. Okay, in the xylem, the water, where is water found? Where do you guys think water is found? So let's say this is the water, okay? The blue are the water droplets. Of course, water and minerals are found in the soil. And the roots, what's the function of the roots? The function of the roots is they absorb these water molecules, correct? And they absorb these water molecules, and where do they take them? They take them upwards. Why upwards? So the leaves can perform photosynthesis. Because remember, what was the formula of photosynthesis? Let me remind you guys. The formula of photosynthesis was what? It was 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O gives you C6 H12O6 plus 6 O2. So we need water to perform photosynthesis. So of course the roots, so if they ask you about the direction of water movement, it's unidirectional, so it only goes in one direction and it goes upwards. However, for the phloem, it's bidirectional, okay? So this is also important to note. So for the sucrose, for the phloem, bidirectional movement. Why? Because if we look up here, we might have a leaf that is performing photosynthesis. So it's making carbohydrates. It's making this glucose sucrose. So what will I call it? I will call it the source. Let's say I had a younger leaf. It's not able to perform photosynthesis at this super high level to maintain nutrition and to remain surviving. So I will transport, so the plant will transport some of this carbohydrates from the source to a sink. Okay? Does that make it a bit more clear? There is no one specific case where I can tell you have this is the source and this is the sink. Okay? It depends if they're telling you this part of the plant is performing photosynthesis at a high level, producing carbohydrates. Of course, this is going to be the source. While if they tell you this part cannot produce carbohydrates, cannot perform photosynthesis, or it performs it at a very low rate, that would be the sink. Okay, so because it was gonna go from the source to the sink. You're most welcome. So let's continue back to the book if everything is clear. So here they're just telling us about the importance of the transport systems. Of course, transport of water, of organic materials is very important. We don't need to get into it. And here it's just a repetition of the function of the xylem and the structure of them, which we mentioned already. Okay, guys, please, any diagram you see, know how to label it. Especially if you're going to do the IG, they're going to most probably ask you to draw the drawing and to label it. Okay? But in school, usually it's just coming to label. So make sure you know how to draw them and you know how to label them. So for the phloem, we already said their function, the companion cells, we talked about it, but I'll only dive your attention into one thing, is the labeling. So this diagram here know how to label it. Okay, know where the companion cell is, know where the sieve plate, know where the sieve tube element. It's very important. Same thing for the xylem. Okay, this is also extremely important and you have to know it. When they're gonna ask you, they might show you an image or they might tell you to describe the vascular arrangement and a leaf and a stem and a root. Okay, so you have to be able to know each one how the xylem and the phloem are arranged. It's very simple. In the leaf, always you see the xylem is towards the inside. Okay, so the xylem is above the phloem and the xylem is towards the inside. If you look at the stem, what's special about the stem? It's in a ring form. Okay, so ring structure, ring-like structure. Directly you're going to be thinking about a stem, and of course the xylem is towards the center. And remember, in the middle, what do we have? We have the pith. Surrounding the outermost layer was the epidermis. Under the epidermis we have the cortex. And don't forget the functions of the cortex of the pith. Okay? And finally, for the roots, directly think about like a star shape or an X shape. The xylem is the X or star shape, and then you have the phloem surrounding it. Okay? So make sure you're able to differentiate between roots, leaves, and stem. And also, before we continue, know for a dicot and a monocot. So this is also important. Here, for a root and monocot roots, so this example is for dicot roots. If it's a monocot root, the vascular bundles form a ring near the center around the pith. So pay attention to that. So you have to differentiate between monocots and dicots for leaves, stems, and roots. For leaves, it's easy. Now you will see an example of it. For leaves, if you have a monocot leaf, look at the veins. In monocot, they are parallel to each other. And a dicot, it's more of a netted pattern. Okay? Now let's move on to the pathway of the water and mineral uptake from the soil. So we already said the xylem. Okay, let's start from here. So what are we saying over here? Water moves into the root hairs. Why did we say water moves into the root hairs? Because of osmosis. And why? Because we have a lower water potential. Okay, so since we have a lower water potential, that's why water will enter. And now this continuous entry of water will increase what? The turgor pressure. Since we have an increase in turgor pressure, it will force the water out through the cell wall, then the cytoplasm, and then it will go into the endodermis. Okay, and you have to know, the endodermis is what? The deepest layer of the cortex. So look at the pathway. Let me write it again here. So first we're gonna go from the soil, okay? This is where the water is found. So H2O is found here. Then, remember, root hair cells. And just a small note, what did we say about root hair cells? I will write it down very quickly. This is like a summary for everything, guys, okay? So pay attention and try to take notes with me. So root hair cells, we said, they are found in a large number. Why are they found in a large number? To increase the surface area, which allows increased absorption. Okay? So the root hair cells are absorbing the water. Then because of the increase of turgor pressure, it will pass through the cell wall. After the cell wall, it goes into the epidermis. Remember, the epidermis was the outermost layer. Then we have the cortex. Then in the cortex, we have the endodermis. And the endodermis is what's important to know about it. It is the deepest layer. And then after it passes the endodermis, it will reach the xylem. And now the xylem can transport it upward to the other part of the plant. Okay? So let's just see. Okay, so what you also have to know is that pushing force, what do we call it? This pushing force comes from, it's called the root pressure. Okay, it's over here. I don't know why the highlighting is not working. That's whatever. Okay, so no, the pushing force is called what? The root pressure. And this movement of water, for the people who are taking year 2, we took it in the extraterritorial system, where we said water passes through the aquaporins. And this passing of water through aquaporins does not need ATP. It's a passive form of transport. No ATP needed. Okay? Now for the uptake of minerals. Before I move to the uptake of minerals, did you all understand the uptake of water from the soil and how the process happens step by step? Okay, one thing to add is what, if we look here, before we move on, you see a blue arrow and a purple arrow. So there are 2 paths it could take. The purple arrow is it passes through the cell wall, while the blue arrow just passes through the cytoplasm. Okay, so just know there's 2 paths it could take. Okay, we have a question. Can you explain what ATP is? ATP is just how our cells use energy. So the form of energy our cells use is usually most of the time in ATP form, which is adenosine triphosphate. Okay? Now to move on, uptake of minerals by the roots. We said it needs energy. We already mentioned it here. So it needs energy, so it needs ATP, and it takes it against a concentration gradient. And this ATP comes how? Comes by performing cellular respiration. And I'll just remind you of the formula of cellular respiration. It was C6H12O6 plus 6O2 gives you 6H2O plus 6CO2. So if they ask you how can you increase the rate of mineral uptake, you would need more energy. How do I get this more energy? I perform cellular respiration. How do I increase the rate of cellular respiration? I increase the amount of oxygen available. Okay? Now let's look at the transport mechanisms in plants. Here they're just giving you an example. So since the pressure at the top of the plant is low and you have a higher pressure in the roots, that's why water will flow from down to up. So it goes upwards. Okay? And why is the pressure of water low above the ground? Because of a process called transpiration. What is transpiration? Okay, so you have to know the definition of transpiration. It's the evaporation of water from the surfaces of the mesophyll cells in the leaves and the diffusion of water vapor from the leaves into the environment through the stomata. So there's 2 ways. We can either lose water from the leaves or through the stomata. Remember, that's why we said that in the stomata, it has 2 functions, gas exchange, and also helps reduce water loss. And now this loss of water vapor from the leaves, what does it cause? It causes this suction force that pulls the water up the stem. And what do we call this force? Transpiration pull. Because of transpiration, we have a lower pressure at the top, so that's why water will move upwards. And we call this force transpiration pull. And then this flow of water, we're going to call it transpiration stream. So it's just the terms that you have to be familiar with. Okay? And also, the movement of a solution due to differences in pressure is called bulk flow. So if they ask you, how does water move up? It moves up the xylem vessels by bulk flow. Why by bulk flow? Because we have a difference in pressure. Okay, and it's the same thing for the one at the bottom. If you have any questions, let me know as I'm going through the material. If everything is good, also let me know. Root pressure is here. It's the pushing force in the root system. So when we're talking about the root system, okay, we will be talking about root pressure. Just so you don't get confused. So we talked about root pressure here in this part. I just highlighted it. That's when we're talking about the root system. But when we're talking about the full transport, so for it to go up to the leaves, up to other parts of the plant, what's it called? The force will be transpiration, pull, and the flow of it would be bulk flow. Okay, I will repeat it very quickly. Let me show it here. So we know that water or anything moves from high pressure to low pressure. Okay? This is step number 1. So for water to move upwards, it should move from high pressure to low pressure. So top of the plant, I should have low pressure. And at the bottom, so the roots, I should have high pressure. What contributes to this low pressure at the top of the plant? Transpiration. And we already explained what transpiration is. What is transpiration? Transpiration is the loss of water, either from the mesophyll cells or by water vapor through the stomata. Now, since transpiration is causing this difference in pressure, what pulls the water up? It will be the transpiration pull. So the force is referred to as the transpiration pull. And then the flow of it will just be called transpiration stream. And again, the movement of any solution, so not just water, any solution that is due to pressure differences, we call it bulk flow. Is that more clear? Okay, perfect. You're most welcome. So here is just a diagram, just to show you guys. Again, look how water moves into the roots by osmosis. That's the first step. We have a cohesive column for it. Tension pulls it upward. So also, again, every diagram, know how to label it and understand it properly. You mean the difference between sieve tubes and elements? Here it's just one sieve tube elements. If you have time, just let me know at the end what you mean by your question. Again, anything in bold, guys, make sure you know it. Okay, I'll show you a picture of it. But let's keep it till the end, please. So let's just explain what wilting is. Wilting is basically the sagging of leaves and the stem Y due to the loss of turgor pressure in cells because of water shortage. So remember, we said, how does the turgor pressure increase? The turgor pressure increases when we have water flowing inside. Now, since there's water shortage, there's no water flowing inside, we're going to have a decrease in turgor pressure. Whenever we have a decrease in turgor pressure, what's going to happen to the plant? It's going to wilt. Okay? And here for transpiration, they're just telling us the different roles transpiration plays in. Okay? So I'll highlight the important stuff. So it enables us the transport of minerals, and it also helps cool down the leaves when they are exposed to intense sunlight. Think about it like sweating in humans. It's not exactly the same. Of course, it's not the same. But try to relate the two concepts. It cools down by losing water in a hot environment. Same as humans. If it's hot, we sweat in order to cool down. But of course, if we have an excessive rate of transpiration, a huge loss of water is going to wilt and it will dry out. Now, factors that can affect the rate of transpiration. Of course, these are external factors. Light intensity. Increased light intensity is going to increase the rate of transpiration because it wants to cool down. Okay? However, if we keep it in high intensity, it could start wilting because remember we said an exaggerated increase in the rate of transpiration causes the plant to wilt and dry out. Also, humidity. Under very humid conditions, what's going to happen? The rate of transpiration slows down. Okay? So just make yourself aware of these external factors. Let's check the other external factors. But this is logging, I don't know why. Oops, I know why. Okay. Air movements. The rate of transpiration, what will happen to it, is reduced when the air is still, but when the air is moving, it will increase. Temperature. Higher temperature, of course, increased rate of transpiration. Water supply. If short in water supply, it will close its stomata to prevent water loss, so slow rate of transpiration. However, if there's a lot of water, it can increase the rate of transpiration, of course, to a certain point. Okay, this is where we're going to be talking about also translocation, okay, which I already mentioned before. Just a quick revision of it. Remember, we said translocation, movement of molecules from the source to a sink. Remember, I told you guys, the source is where the organic molecules are produced, and the sink is where they are used or stored. So the leaves that are photosynthesizing will be the sources. However, roots and flowers, they receive these organic molecules, are what are going to be the sinks. And look here, the difference between xylem and phloem. In xylem, it's an upward direction. However, in phloem, it can be in either direction, up or down. These are very important to know. And then finally, the transport of gases. Remember, gases are transported by diffusion. Okay? And this diffusion is through the stomata. Carbon dioxide enters, oxygen leaves. Okay? And of course, we still need oxygen for the roots. Why? So they can perform cellular respiration and absorb mineral salts. And now the last concept, okay, is what we're gonna talk about. Two types of plants that have adapted over time to live in very harsh environments. These are the xerophytes, and we'll also see something called the hydrophytes. So xerophytes versus hydrophytes. So from the name, xerophytes means very dry environments, okay? So if they live in very dry environments, what do you guys think the adaptations are going to be? Is it going to be to reduce water loss or to increase water loss? Anyone can answer? Reduces, of course. Because we live in a very dry environment, I don't want to lose water. So do you think we will increase the number of stomata or decrease the number of stomata? Which one do you think it would be? So of course it will reduce the number of stomata in order to reduce water loss. Exactly, it will decrease the number of stomata. Perfect. So look, for the leaves, you have to guys know the adaptations, but they're all logical. Okay, like you don't have to memorize them. You can just think about it. So of course, the leaves, okay? Through leaves, we can lose water by transpiration. Okay, isn't that correct? So what am I gonna do to the leaf? I'm going to make the surface area smaller, so I lose less water. So their leaves are reduced in size to minimize the surface area exposed to sunlight for me not to lose water by evaporation. And I also have they're covered with a layer of hair-like structures that trap humid air around the leaf to reduce water loss. This is also one adaptation. Now the stomata. Of course, the number will be reduced, and some also have a sunken stomata, so it's not completely exposed to the outside, which also helps reduce water loss. And of course, they will close during the day, because that's when there's sunlight, it could be hot, and they open during the night. Now the roots. If I need water, I live in a dry environment, I need my roots to extend a large area to be able to find water. So the roots of a xerophyte are going to be larger and they're going to be extending to huge parts of lands. This is an example of a sunken stomata, okay? Of course, it's going to be found in xerophytes. And think of cactus plants. Where do cacti live? In the desert. It's very hot. There's not much water. If you look at it, the leaves are very thin. A small number of stomata. Okay? Roots will extend to a huge area. And stomata would be sunken. Okay, it depends on the type of plant. Now hydrophytes. Hydrophytes live in wet areas. Now, pay attention. Excess water is bad, and too little water is bad. Don't think excess water is good. So excess water is bad. So what will they do? They will keep their stomata open. No need to close them because there's plenty of water. So if they lose water through transpiration, it's fine. And they are also less rigid. This is also important to know. And that's quite it. It will be basically the opposite of the xerophytes. So in the xerophytes, you have a lower number of stomata, and the hydrophytes, you have a larger number of stomata. And the xerophytes, the stomata will be closed during the day, and the hydrophytes, they will be open during the day. And the xerophytes, you would have a longer, more complex root system, and the hydrophytes, they don't need to, but there's plenty of water around them. They don't need to extend their roots to different areas to absorb water. Okay, and they gave you two examples, water lily and duckweed. That's it for the video. Do you guys have any questions about chapter 8, or it's all clear? From both year 1 students and year 2, because year 2 you guys have it for the exam periodic, so make sure you know them, because they will probably ask you some questions about it, and you don't want to get silly mistakes because of this chapter. And for the year 1 students, is this all clear? Did you understand it? Let me know in the chat, guys, please. Perfect. You're most welcome. You're most welcome, guys. Okay, so since none of you have any question left, thank you all for watching. Okay, for the year 2, I'm gonna text you guys on your group right now to see which chapter to do with you, because I need to leave by 7, so 9 Dubai time. Okay, I'll check with you guys. But for the people who joined, thank you all for joining in. Thank you for participating with me. I hope the session was beneficial and you guys are now sure of everything. And I wish you the best of luck on your exam. Thank you all so much, and see you soon. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.